Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show where we with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/. Oh no, it's not 11 a.m. It's 12 p.m. I gotta update. I gotta make straight. It's the start of season 4. I'm already just right off the rails. Right off the rails.
Just you're getting it wrong, Trevor.
Yeah. It's been a few weeks off, just getting rusty on my hosting duties. It's not like I don't have another show that I do every week. Where
Vacations are terrible. Nobody should take them.
Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CND Games, or later on your favorite podcast service. Mitra Jordan, Raffael, Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health and I cannot speak today. This is gonna be a great season, y'all. This is gonna be a great season. Talk about mental health in these unprecedented times, as well as how gaming affects us. If you're here with us live in the chat and you leave a question that Treavor Bettis, will stumble over later in the show, but before we get to that, our topic today is toxic positivity. But before that, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know, and so I can stop talking?
I'm Mitra Jordan. Gosh, we have been off air for a little bit. And I, for one, don't wish to rest on my laurels.
Wait, are you throwing that? Are we throwing crowns now? Okay, that's it. I'm already pulling from Tiara space.
I did not know this was going to be a thing. I'm not prepared.
Yeah,
I have nothing to put on my head.
This is season 4, Trevor, and you don't yet have something to put on your head.
I got
something on his head already.
I mean, I
can't use a shoe, Trevor. There. Chat says use a shoe. Put a shoe on your head.
Okay, the shoes are dirty. Here
okay,
we go.
Well, they struggle with their headwear. I'm Mitra Jordan. I'm a registered clinical counselor working out of Victoria, British Columbia, and I'm here with my fine friend right there, with the tiara, because he's just so special.
Other direction.
Shit, really? Sorry. Okay, this happens every time. I can't. No, but if I.
There we go.
Listen, people.
Nobody move.
I'm just going to point out that in life as well, I am very directionally challenged. Very.
Oh,
very.
Wow.
This tiara is coming off now. So yeah. There we go.
So I am Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons, and I am a psychologist in Washington State and the clinical director over at TakeThis.org. One of the folks that helps bring this on, although it's really Codename Entertainment that does all of it. But anyway, I'm also an expert on the applied use of role-playing games in clinical and learning settings, and I am here to took off tiaras. I am here to have the best hats, and I will take no questions on that.
Were you sure to get your new title in there?
Oh no, I did. Yeah,
you
no,
did?
I did.
Yeah,
I'm a clinical psychologist in Washington State, freshly minted.
Yeah. What? And then she got a top hat.
Mitra's already throwing down.
But congrats, Dr. B. We're all very, very happy for you. Oh shit. Audio listeners are not getting the full experience of this episode. I apologize now. You're gonna have
come
to
into
just
my house and you try and out hat me.
No, I only have the two this time. So clearly, I can't out-hat you. Imitation, have
Oh,
you
wait,
not heard,
hang on.
is the sincerest form of
You talk
flattery.
amongst yourself. Audio listeners, you're going to miss something else, too.
But yeah, it looks like we got a lot of fantastic new viewers out there. Hi, everybody. Welcome to season 4. Mitra and I are just going to have a hat
All right,
battle.
there we go.
There we go. While Trevor just beat us both. There's no point.
Oh my
This
God.
helmet does not
I
work
can't
for
win.
hearing
He
through
brings
stuff.
out the
I'm
Master
done.
Chief helmet.
I'm done
I
for
can't win.
today. Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
Trevor wins this.
If I could put these laurels on him, be good. Yeah.
But what are we talking about today?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should do a show. I mean,
Yeah, we should.
Right.
now that we got all that out of our system. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, we're going to talk about toxic positivity. And yeah, I know. that's the same sound that I make every time I see the good vibes only sign at my local bar.
I swear I am going to just
So let's start this off the way that we normally do with these things of defining what toxic positivity is. Well, I fix my hair.
Yeah,
By
no,
all
actually, I
means.
want to kick this over to Mitra because she had such a good definition, foundational definition within our pre-production meeting. Mitra, I want to kick up a drink and just grumble about this as well because we've already got people doing this in the chat.
Okay. I don't know why I was maybe brilliant yesterday, but I cannot touch
Because you're
on
brilliant.
that for a second today. But hey, I'll do my best. So being positive is generally a good thing. But we put a lot of pressure on people, particularly in Western culture, particularly in North America, to always be upbeat and positive. And unfortunately, that takes away from how we might really be feeling. And there's a difference between the polite chit chat at the grocery store, or if you're just passing a friend in the street, you don't really have a chance to catch up properly. But when we aren't able to actually express how we're authentically doing, and we have an idea that everyone else can cope and we can't, that's where positivity is toxic. If I have the idea that everyone else has got to be doing fine because they say so, it's very lonely. When there's the idea of good vibes only, it leaves out my experience and who I am. I'm not saying we want to go to our friends and dump or burden them, which is the worry most people experience in this. But positivity is toxic if there's no way that it can hold the space for our true experience together.
Well, foundationally, it's this idea of denial. It is absolute denial of reality. Like there is an incredible difference between this is a problem, let's acknowledge that, versus gloom, despair, and eternal hopelessness.
Yeah. I think yesterday, one of the things that came out was the idea of rushing to fix and how that relates to toxic positivity. And this is if, oh, how are you doing? Well, it's kind of tough. My dad just died. Oh, well, that was a couple of months ago, right? How are you doing now? Like, are you or, oh yeah, my grandma died recently. Yeah, but you weren't terribly close to her, right? I remember you only saw her a few times in your life.
I think I have a therapeutic baseball bat somewhere around here.
Also, I'm gonna be real. That one hits way too close to home.
I'm so sorry.
I literally had someone do that.
Yeah.
It's incredible and it's that denial aspect, and this discomfort at any sort of. I mean. This is going to feel really obvious to say, and I'd like to joke and say it took me 3 degrees of psychology to be able to say this with authority, but discomforting feelings are uncomfortable.
And that should be okay.
But we want to avoid that as humans because we don't like discomfort, but sometimes discomfort is something. We've said this on the show before. all emotions, when they're working right, are functional. They're adaptive. They're trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
And sometimes uncomfortable emotions are there to let us know, hey, there's an actual problem going on that needs to be addressed. Sometimes grief is a natural reaction to a loss.
A problem or something going on for a person isn't something you need to fix. Instead, what you can do is hold the space for it. And there's a very simple way to explain what that means. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit sad. My grandfather died. Oh, were you close? Is not holding the space. How was that for you? How are you doing? Is holding the space. So, we kind of want to do more of the, how are you doing? And then eventually, is there a way I can help? Is there anything I can do to support you? Or if you can't, you can be there and just listen for a few minutes. And if you can't, you can say, I would love to catch up about this later.
Well, there's this, I just anecdotally, one of the things I've noticed is that we as people have a hard time holding to use your term, holding space for ambiguity and discomfort without jumping it into the problem solving mode. And for a lot of people, it feels like doing nothing, but holding that space is in fact doing something. It's just less direct.
Yeah, a lot of what happens for people is their emotions or feelings get minimized. Oh, wasn't that bad, was it? Or they get told how they should feel. It's not whether it's in a minimizing, it's not a big deal, or let me tell you what you can do to cope with that, and that doesn't really help. Or they get cheerleaded. Oh, you can cope with that. I saw you get through this other thing that was really tough before. And so those kinds of things really interfere with the connection that you and they may have. And it interferes with their own processing, where they're kind of being told that it's not okay to feel that way.
And well, I want to take a moment and say there is a place for cheerleading. There is a place for reassurance.
Yeah.
It's not always a bad thing. It just like anything else, it's a tool and it has specific uses.
Yeah.
And
it just needs to be tethered to reality.
Right. And there's a lot of times that the messages we get from other people, which are just they mean it so well. They are trying so hard, but oh, baby, is it the wrong thing to say?
Yeah, I think some tools get treated as a catch-all.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and they aren't.
No. And I mean, I'll make jokes about the idea. Well, anyway, that's actually irrelevant. The point is that knowing the right tool for the right situation requires acceptance of the situation. And this idea of toxic positivity denies actual acceptance of what's going on. You have to be able to acknowledge a problem if you truly want to fix it. And toxic positivity denies the problem exists. And there's something that Mitra said yesterday that was really important. And that's the idea of how exclusionary encountering this is. And all of us have examples of this, but I would love to hear what Mitra has to say on this.
Okay. And Mitra would love to hear.
you very specifically said that the toxic positivity is ironically disconnecting from other people because it gives this impression that you don't belong here if you're struggling at all.
Right. So it's the idea that we should be coping, should being one of those words, and we've certainly talked about this in the past, but if we're in an environment where we have to smile, or we're being told that we have to come across a certain way, and I'm not talking about so much for your work, but if I go to a friend's house and it's like, I'm feeling like, wow, really heavy, or I'm being told that what I say or do is, that's kind of heavy. I certainly would get the impression that my feelings aren't welcome and my feelings are a part of me. I'm not saying you want to go to a friend's house and deal with that friend as if they were a therapist. That's actually unfair and not where, unloading belongs. But you also shouldn't have to put on a bright face on it all the time. And when someone does bring up sort of good vibes only as a concept, what if I'm not in a good place? I have in the past had friends say, "Oh, I don't think I should get together. I'm kind of, I feel like I'd be a burden." And it's like, no, it's okay. You can just be as you are. And that's the welcoming, compassionate position we want to be able to hold. And this is not to say that if a person's in a tough place, we get into discussing their whatever that is going on for them. They may just really want to be supported and to have a good time, but they can more easily do that if you can also know what's going on for them, so that you're kind to them and you leave space for their whatever they're processing as well. So the underlying feeling is that one doesn't want to be minimized or denied what's happening. And I'm going to bring up Christmas and holidays and family time, so you guys can all have an internal sense for a minute.
Suddenly my anxiety just spiked.
Right? Because if you're at Thanksgiving dinner, but you're having a bad day and your family's like, it is Thanksgiving dinner. Your mother worked very hard to fix all that food. You will smile and eat. I mean, I think it comes back for all of us one way or another, right? and so that's partly what I'm talking about, is this denial of emotion means I don't belong.
Yeah.
You can come back now. We're good. Okay. We're done dinner. The dishes are put away, and it's just the cousins sitting around and speaking their truth.
The cool cousins?
The really cool ones.
Okay.
The friendly ones who really know our stuff. They know why you haven't come out to Uncle Mark and all the rest of it. And they're, they're our people.
God, it's this expectation. I mean, you also said this yesterday. I mean, you were on fire yesterday.
God, why can't yesterday be today? I gotta tell you.
I've got the notes.
I know, and I'm the bad kid in school who didn't bring up the notes before the show. It's really.
But one of the things you said is that it's performative. This is positivity.
Oh yeah, it's coming back to me now.
Right, and we're talking about this idea of. It's coming back to the idea of denial once again, that there's a big difference between acceptance of negative experience and reveling in it versus denying that that's a thing at all. And ironically, there's research to show the idea that denying one's emotions as a coping strategy actually takes more resources than being like, okay, that's a thing, I see it, and how do I work with that thing, moving on. It takes more resources to actively deny negative experiences. So it ironically, good vibes only brings bad vibes.
Yeah, it's kind of like the gopher game, when you're a kid and things pop up and you have to keep pushing them back down. And so any form of denial or suppression actually will do that. Whereas if I have a place and time to kind of feel my feelings, then I can go, okay, not now. But when I go home, I'll think about that. And it's not a denial. It's a useful capacity to set things aside because we're not in a place where maybe it's appropriate to get into it. But if it's never a place where it's appropriate to get into this is where we get into our own felt sense of toxic positivity and that need to be positive. There's actually somebody who wrote a great book about this called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers.
Which is still just the best title ever.
It is the best title. Yeah, and she really talks about the way we learn as children sometimes to not express our true feelings. And I'm not talking about those moments when your kid is an absolute savage and bites someone's arm, and they're only two, so it's not the end of the world. I'm talking about when your kid comes home from school and says, I had a really bad day, and you say, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine, dinner's going to be ready, in a few minutes, and you don't attend to their feelings. And what we learn is that we shouldn't attend to our feelings, that our feelings aren't important, that maybe what we do is important, but we still need to attend to our feelings regardless of the choices we make in terms of managing what we do. But if there's no place to talk about it, and we learn that there isn't really much to talk about, we're not in tune with ourselves. And this makes it really difficult to cope with things that come up. And it makes it really difficult to make the space for ourselves to talk about things. Or even if you are in a position, gosh, I'm starting to ramble, but even if you're in a place where somebody's asking or curious about how you're doing, you might not have a sense of being connected to that.
Well, and one of the things I think we do need to mention as, because I've seen this comment come up in chat a couple of times, that this idea of toxic positivity is, I think, a fairly North American phenomenon. And the idea of the idea of emotional expression varies from culture to culture.
Definitely.
And there's research to support this as well, that the results of emotional suppression in specifically in the United States on the mental well-being of folks is very different than it would be. And I think I looked at one study that looked at a Hong Kong population as well, and it's a very different experience. So I want to be real clear and real overt that we're speaking from a very North American, specifically United States and Canadian framework.
And from a more of a cross-cultural perspective, just to bring this in for a minute, although I think in some cultures the collective is more important than the individual, and duty and obligation are more important, people don't expect you to always be happy about this. People expect to support each other in doing the duty and obligation, but there is in some cultures certainly space to at least express how you're feeling about that. And if it's a shared world in that this is what we do, but it's understandable that we might find that tough sometimes, it does make it easier.
Yeah, so like I said, I want to be just overt about the fact that, Mitra's training and my training are largely North American based, although Mitra has a much more overt multicultural focus in her psychology practice than, well, most people ever will. I just felt the urge to bring that up and say, this is a North American thing.
Oh yeah. I think
this
that's
is a very
important.
very North American concept. Because one of the folks in chat brought up the idea that this level of positivity in Germany was jarring.
Absolutely. And a lot of the Northern European friends I've had, if you say, how are you? It's not just a little chit chat to sort of set the tone. I learned from Dr. B that is called Phatic Communication, by the way. And that's where we make those little sounds. How are you? Good. And then we can go on to have an actual conversation. But if you say to someone who's Middle Eastern as well, how are you? They will tell you, well, my shoulder hurts. And that goes for the Northern Europeans as well. They'll be like, oh, my father's doing this and my mother's like that and my child, they'll get into it, which is very confusing for a North American person because...
Well, hold on. I want to push back on that for a little bit, because as a North American autistic person, I love that level of honesty.
Fair enough.
Oh my
Fair
God,
enough.
I love that level of honesty.
Yeah.
This is why so many of my friends are from Boston, Philly, and New York, because they just straight up tell me.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that.
Yeah. That's the same with my friends. Actually, I wondered, what is it about these people? Oh, a thing they all have in common is they don't worry terribly much about tact. When we're close to each other, they're just going to say what they feel and say what they mean, and it's so much easier. cope with.
Cypher Tier is in the chat, by the way. Hey Cypher, thank you for being here.
Hey.
I forgot to mention Chicago. Yes,
Yeah.
I love my friends
Well,
from Chicago proper for that reason too.
Cypher actually does exactly what I do. Cypher says, not me. I usually ask if they want the truth or do they want me to be polite and answer. That's essentially what I do. Like if I'm legitimately having not a great day and someone's just like, hey man, how's it going? I'm just like, do you really want to know? Or should we just keep the conversation going? Because it's true. It's just like, hey, if you want to get into it, I've had some stuff going on, but like, if you want to just have a nice conversation, I can also do that fine.
Yeah, and I actually really love that idea, right? Because it's a nod to the true feelings that are going on, but it also says, yeah, I'm coping. We don't need to get into it, or maybe actively, I don't feel like getting into it. Awful day. Let's not go there.
Don't need to go there.
Don't need to go there. But to sort of just not have to say, oh yeah, I'm doing great. How are you doing? You're great. Yeah, great. Oh, it's just so great not to have to do the great. Sorry, but there it is.
There was literally last week. My buddy got in the car. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I'm like, "I'm doing good. How about you guys?" "I'm good." And one of us went, "How are you doing?" afterwards, and we're just like, we just went through that. We literally were just going through the verbal motions.
Hold on. Let's talk about that for a second, because Mitra brought up, this is your vocabulary term for the day, audience, phatic communication. And phatic communication is this thing we do where the words don't matter. Yeah. It's just to fill a social role of acknowledging other people's existence. And if anybody has ever had the experience of going to like the grocery store and saying hi, and the checker replies with "Good, you?" and it's because they're not actually listening to the words. It's just a social context of acknowledging each other exists. And I've done the exact same thing as you, Trevor, where it's been like, "Hey man, how's it going?" "Oh, I'm good. How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. How are you doing?" And that's second time we know we're actually asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I blame that also for have a great flight. You too.
I've even done the happy birthday and to you.
I did that to a DoorDash driver the other day too. They were like, "All right, enjoy your food." "You too." And I'm like, you know what I mean. Have a great day, man.
See, and I thought it was just a Catholic thing where it was just this call and response, "Peace upon you and you as well." And maybe the force be with you, and also
okay, tell you what, I think that's a good time to take a quick break, remind our viewers and listeners of our disclaimer, and then come back and talk a little bit more about toxic positivity, and then check out chat and see what questions they have. So remember, you can put your questions in chat, and the awesome mods, Jay and Mars, will grab them and put them in the doc that we have. So let's take that disclaimer break.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
I never thought I'd say this about a disclaimer, but I really missed hearing that.
Seriously.
So soothing. Okay, so what is something that we can do to like try and not have the toxic positivity if we worry that we have done that? What's something we can watch out for?
Where do we begin on this? Because there's so much. There's nuance to this.
Yes.
Okay. There's so much nuance to this because I think a lot of people, when they hear rants about toxic positivity, there's this danger of swinging completely the other way.
Yeah.
And that's denying any hope.
Yeah.
And that's also a danger, because in order to find solutions or work through a problem, we need to be able to see all aspects of it. And
Mhm.
it's possible to be hopeful without being, denying challenges.
Yeah, so hope has to be connected to reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know if all of you or any of you have had a chance, I think many of you would have had a chance to see Ted Lasso, but remember those first few episodes in particular where, okay, so
That was
you mean
Dr. B
I know
shaking
a
his head.
media thing without Dr. B knowing a
To
media
be
thing?
fair, I
I'm
don't
impressed.
either.
I'm
Listen,
It's on
I
my
was
list to watch.
studying for
Wow.
my
sorry.
licensure exam.
Okay, fair enough, but it has been out for a while. I'm just saying. This was season 2 that just went by. Wow,
Did you just show shame me?
well, just so much of the time, I'm gonna say, I haven't a clue, and now for once, I am bringing it. Yeah.
Yeah, there.
So,
She's
all right.
got her laurels on. There we go.
Right. So let's not get into those who recognize what I'm talking about will know that that idea of, just believe when you actually don't have anything to back it up in terms of some kind of roadmap through whatever it is, whatever the struggle is, can make it much harder for people. It's like, I'm supposed to believe, but how? So, toxic positivity can feel like some kind of bizarre act of faith. And that's really not what we're talking about. What's helpful is to have a sense of what someone is struggling with, recognize that you can't and you don't need to solve it. I'm going to use a different example, actually. I'm thinking, when we talk about, okay, it's really going well today. When we talk about any kind of really big problem that we see in the world, okay, like how governments deal with things or something a person's struggling with in terms of bureaucracy and paperwork or whatever. And it's just some of these bigger things feel really overwhelming. This is not the time to say, oh, it's going to be fine. You'll get through it, when they're really wondering about how they're going to get through it. So positivity that's connected to reality is like, yeah, so let's look at some of the steps that you can do or things that you've tried. And sometimes it comes to there's nothing more you can do right now. And that's when it's helpful to take one's mind off it. So if you can get through this, or it's gonna be fine, is connected to a person's real experience, it's going to be much more effective. Then it's genuinely holding the hope for someone without imposing a you should be hopeful on them.
And that's one thing to for folks to bear in mind, is that we as people we often want to help people solve something. And it's very natural for us to jump to solutions. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Especially when we think we understand the nature of what somebody's dealing with. But it often behooves us to, like we said earlier, take a step back. Just create that holding space for them. Ask questions about it that don't begin with why, because that invites rationalization and justification.
This is making me smile a little bit because there's questions on your D20, and I'm really enjoying that right now as you talk about questions.
For audio listeners, there's a D20 on his fez that has question marks on it.
I will
ask questions.
I will tell you that the name of this particular model of Fez is called Die Curious.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Perfect colors. Yeah.
But asking open-ended questions about people's experiences and being able to accurately reflect back their perspective is a powerful tool in and of itself. It feels slower than problem solving. It feels less active than problem solving. But it's often so helpful when it comes to joining people and creating that holding space and helping them look at things from a more complete perspective.
And I'm going to bring up a piece around personal responsibility, right? So if somebody comes home and they're in a really low mood, and you see them, it's going to affect your mood initially. And that's because humans are interconnected and we pick up what people are putting down, right? But just because we pick it up doesn't mean we have to take it on, and it doesn't mean we have to solve it.
You're talking
right?
about emotional contagion?
Yeah. And I think it really is affected and affects the toxic positivity piece, right? Because we might have a knee-jerk reaction to start being ultra up and positive to make things better. You know, it's like, we're all in a good mood, but somebody's crying in the corner. No one's going to have a really great time, or they're going to have to work to ignore and therefore exclude the person crying in the corner. But if we can acknowledge that somebody's having a hard time, we still don't have to be responsible for it, depending. If it's your child, bets are off. But I mean, if it's your sister or even your spouse, you just want to show some compassion, but you don't necessarily have to solve what's going on for them. And I think this is why people sometimes feel burdened in terms of the emotions they're experiencing. And they don't want to burden others. It's like, I don't want to be a burden, is where I'm going. And that's because we do have an innate sense of feeling what's in the room and feeling like we now have to solve it. Or feeling what's in the room and wondering if it's our fault in some way. And so we insert ourselves into the situation in these ways, which really may not be fair to the other person's experience. Maybe they're just having an off day, and that's okay. Not our fault and not our responsibility. And if it's a friend of ours, we can just say, hey, how's it going? But we don't have to take it on. If it's not going so great, we can say, we can ask if we want or have the time, as we've said earlier. But
There's
that's
Oh no, I'm
I'll
sorry.
stop rambling. No, really, I
there's
was
something
done.
you
Thank
said
you.
yesterday
Save
that's
me.
incredibly poignant. I mean, seriously, you were on
If he
fire.
says one more time.
I took notes. You were on fire yesterday. And
Thank you. Thank you for saying that today. It helps hold the faith, given that anyway.
One thing that you said is that forcing people to be positive when they're not ready, or even go so far as to tell people to forgive those who have legitimately transgressed against them, because forgiveness is a process that can't be rushed. For some people, they may never decide to forgive the people who hurt them. And some people do, but that needs to be a process that they come to on their own through the processing of the experience, the emotions, the ramifications, the narrative, etc. And forcing people to do that too quickly can end up damaging them in the process, because they don't have a complete scope of what they're forgiving, how they're forgiving, and it ends up backfiring in so many damaging ways. Mitra said that, by the way. I mean, I'm just repeating what she said.
I'm going to keep him around all the time.
Credit where it's due. I mean,
thank you.
Well,
you
actually,
can't rush
I
an
want
emotional
I actually want to use that as an example, because some people in the chat have been kind of asking, like, okay, but like, how do you tell the difference between the positivity? That right there was being positive, and there was positivity there. He was giving Mitra a compliment about, the meeting that we had yesterday. Mitra wasn't feeling down about the meeting, and Dr. B was just continuously saying, no, you're fantastic, you're great, and it's, don't listen to yourself, all that stuff. Like that was being positive. If Mitra was feeling down about it, and she had problems with it, then that straddles the line of being toxic, for the toxic positivity thing, where it's ignoring the problem that is happening there, and just ignoring it outright. Nope, just be positive, that's all it is, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's not taking into account the person's experience if you're doing that. And I think that's the difference, right? I think that if you're pushing past a person's emotional process, that's also an issue, because the thing is, there is an emotional process, and you don't know how long or what it's going to look like for an individual. And this question of forgiveness certainly is a big piece of it. And I do like to distinguish between resolving something and forgiving someone, because I might have a resolved sense of my relationship with someone who's done me harm. Maybe I cut them off. Maybe I'm just super cautious around them. And there might be a piece of me that does find it really hard to forgive them. But that's not to say that that's festering in any way, right? There's this idea that if we don't forgive someone, we've let it go. No, some things may be unforgivable, and that's okay. You know, somebody harms my child, I'm sorry, that might be unforgivable. Certainly if it was deliberate, it's going to be unforgivable. And I might be really resolved about my relationship with them. It might not have a ton of heat for me or upset for me. I might be okay with that. But that doesn't mean that there's a piece around forgiveness. But if we have an idea in terms of positivity that you can't move forward unless you do a certain thing, right? And we put pressure on people to have to do that thing, right? If you don't forgive, you can't move on. Well,
And
maybe not, but
this is an opportunity to talk about cultural lens as well. That telling people what to think has been the root cause of so many cultural atrocities over the millennia, and not making space for their own narrative, not making space for their own thought process, not making space for their own feelings, whether it's on an individual level or on a cultural level or both. This is something that, as we've said, can cause a lot of damage, to essentially tell people they're thinking incorrectly, not giving them the space to discover it themselves, not exploring it with them, but just straight up saying you're thinking wrong.
Yeah. And when you expect someone to be positive at a time where they can't, you are essentially telling them they're thinking wrong. That's actually right there, the center of it.
I'm like, okay, cool, great, episode over, awesome. We're that's the set. That's what we're doing. One of the other things we talked about yesterday that I think deserves some attention, because it's been commodified in really inappropriate ways by first the mental health profession in and of itself, but then the sort of self-help pop psychology world, is the idea of radical acceptance. And for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with it, this radical acceptance idea came out of largely out of Zen Buddhism, and was, I think, largely introduced to the modern psych world through something called dialectical behavioral therapy. If there are earlier examples of it, then I'm not aware of them. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But it's this idea of truly being able to see all aspects of things and accept things the way they are. And a lot of people misinterpret that as giving up hope.
Yes, and it got connected, particularly in terms of Zen Buddhism and even other religious traditions, as a spiritual bypassing. And so the heart of that idea, and I practiced Zen Buddhism for some time, so really familiar with it from that perspective, is this idea that some emotions are not okay. Sorry, that's the bypassing piece. That's not actually how the religion thinks about it. From a Zen Buddhist perspective, the idea is that we need to compassionately witness all our emotions. The idea of meditation, and why it's so hard to do, is you're sitting with yourself. And as your thoughts arise, you allow them to pass instead of hanging on to them. And this is because, from a neurological perspective, we understand that you can kind of keep certain thought processes going, and that's not super helpful to you. For example, if I'm upset about something, it's one thing to observe my upset and recognize that, say, someone wasn't respecting me in some way or something, I'm upset about it, right? It's one thing to go, yeah, that's upsetting, and to just allow myself to sit with my upset feelings so I can process them. It's another thing to go, yes, and then they did this, and then they did this. And remember 6 years ago when they did that other thing? That was really annoying. And what we're doing there is we're really adding fuel to the upset feelings, and we're magnifying them. And the idea behind these traditions where you sort of meditate and you have time to sit with your emotions is to process them, not to add intensity to them, but to really see what's there. So many of times when I was sitting with other people meditating, somebody would burst into tears. And no one would do anything. We were all sitting there, and this is holding the space, just letting them have their feelings. We knew that they could leave the room for a few minutes and that there was one person designated to follow them if need be. But if they were just going to sit there having tears, that's okay. That's allowing them to work through their feelings. And that the framework was there to hold the space for those feelings. But when we get into this bypassing piece, where toxic positivity has interfered with it, it's the idea that we should somehow be above our feelings, that we should overcome our feelings, that it shouldn't matter, that anger shouldn't be important enough. But anger is an incredibly useful emotion. It helps us understand when our boundaries are violated. It helps us understand when we're feeling some kind of ouch trigger from the past that we might need to look at. And sometimes it's really justified to feel angry. Because if somebody does a terrible thing to my friend, I'm going to be super pissed about it, and for good reason.
So there's an element to something here, Mitra, that I've been thinking about, and we haven't brought it up. And it's at the core of this idea about toxic positivity is judgment, which is antithetical to the, as you brought up, the Buddhist practice of mindfulness, judgment that certain emotions are bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really core thing here to focus on if we're thinking about toxic positivity within our own life, that all emotions, like you just said, all emotions serve a functional purpose when they're working right.
Mm-hmm.
Even anger lets us know that there's been some sort of transgression or injustice. Anxiety and fear let us know that there may be a legitimate danger to us. Grief lets us know that we lost something important. And these are all powerful markers.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, of course, we know in mental health processes that what can happen is that some of these states get suppressed and they continually are looking for witnessing. In other words, if something happens to me as a kid in my family that I never get to process, and then there's a similar thing as an adult, it's kind of like it can hook that. And we've talked about triggers in the past and understanding what's called emotional activation. But that's a signpost then that there's something that I need to work on or think about. So regardless of the emotional state, it helps us be more connected to ourselves and understand better what's going on for us.
Mm-hmm.
And if this process is shut down by those around us, that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be really clear that sometimes we have to set our emotions aside. If I'm at someone's wedding, it doesn't matter how I feel about the bride and groom. I'm probably not going to stand up in the back and go, I don't think they should get married, right? That's an extreme example, but you know.
Okay. Let's check in with the viewers real quick because we're running out on time here. We're now right up against another show, so we got to be quick on these endings. Okay. I'm gonna say real quick that during the beginning of the show, Mars said that they were putting on a hat as well, and Jay said that they didn't have a hat and were very upset about it. But this comes from AZ Ding Zero. Could this be related to all the trends of quote unquote positive thinking, life coaching, and all of that fluff?
I mean, that was my first introduction. I can't say this definitively, but I can say anecdotally, for me, my first introduction to this idea of, you got to think positive was very much linked to this pop psychology, self-help stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. That was my first introduction to it.
Yeah, I think another piece that's problematic with these kinds of self-help pop psychology things is they don't take your life context into account, which neither does toxic positivity, right? Those are connected. So there's the idea that I can be anyone I want. Well, yeah, but if I grew up in a tough financial situation and I had to go to work at 18 or 19 and college just feels super unaffordable, and anything I want was to be a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a tough road.
Yeah.
And to not take this into account, to compare me to someone who went to Harvard Law School on daddy and mummy's, funding, is going to be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So the toxic positivity sometimes equalizes things that aren't equal.
Well, and it's based on this idea, and we've talked about this subtly in the past. A lot of people are familiar with the concept of internal or external locus of control, the things that I can do. But there's a lesser known concept by a brilliant psychological researcher, Daryl Wing Su, locus of responsibility, and it acknowledges the idea that sometimes systems are slanted against you, and you can have an internal locus of control, but with an external locus of responsibility that says, yeah, the system really is stacked against you. In America, a lot of predominantly white Christian culture is based around this idea of not only internal locus of control, but internal locus of responsibility, that regardless of the system, you can always succeed. And we know that's not really true.
Yeah, that's definitely problematic for sure. And it's very, the idea of the work ethic, anyone with a little hard work can succeed. It's just not true. And we often do end up placing a lot of pressure on ourselves.
And blame.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think this last one that I'm going to read, I'm sorry I didn't get to a lot of the questions today. I did not want to stop the awesome conversations you two were having about this, because I could see it in the chat. A lot of people, it was resonating with a lot of people. But the last one I'm going to read is from Obo Lauren. And this idea was echoed by a lot of people who wrote in. But Obo Lauren says, yeah, there is an impetus to have the quote unquote right thing to say. And often it's better to just ask how to help in that moment. And I so very much agree with that. Literally just asking, do you want input or do you want to talk? Do you want me to listen? Like that. I think that is possibly one of the best questions to ask.
I'm going to call myself out on something.
Okay.
That I have more than once sent to the Crafting Muse via text, because we're friends. We've had emotional conversations, and there have been times where I have sent to her via text, please press 1 if you would like reassurance. Press 2 if you would like empathy. Please press 3 if you would like validation and commiseration.
Mm-hmm.
Please press 4 for a combination of the above. Press 5 or hold for customer service.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
Just the right care in your heart is a start, and just asking people what they need. Really, you don't have to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it enough times. It's okay to not fix it. It's okay to be there and just be present and show affection and do what you can.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is a good place to wrap up this episode. This first episode of season 4. We've got a whole other season ahead of us, as long as I can stop fumbling through the intros. Mitra, Dr. B, where can people find you on the internet if they would like to do so?
Well, mine is short because you can find me on Twitter. I also have a website, which is mitrajordan.com, and my Twitter handle right there. And that's it for me, really. So it's about this guy. Did I point in the right direction?
You did. You got it. you got the David S. Pumpkins.
We're almost at David S. Pumpkin season. Any questions?
That's how I'll do all of the chat questions from now on.
Gonna be for the next
Any
couple weeks.
questions? Yeah, there we go.
Ooh, nice.
But y'all can find me. First of all, follow Take This on all the socials at TakeThis.org. That's the more important, accounts to follow. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on pretty much all the socials at the Dr. B, TheeDoctor, B as in boy. But yeah, you can find me. I'm around. I'll be ranting about cooking and Dungeons and Dragons and random thoughts at 2 a.m. and mental health too.
Yeah.
Sure.
You can find me on Champions of Lore every Wednesday, except for this Wednesday, at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNEgames. We're taking this week off. We'll be back next week, though, with a special episode. Ooh, it's our 50th episode. Ooh. I know. But also starting up this Friday, my other show from the same Mister, where me and my half siblings talk about being donor conceived, and some of them telling their stories about finding that information out, is starting back up for its 3rd season. So if that sounds interesting at all to you, check that out on your favorite podcast service. Thank you to Jay and Mars for moderating in the chat and doing a fantastic job. And thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. If you miss any part of the show, you can catch it later on your favorite podcast service. Maybe at 2, maybe a little later. Depends on my workload. We'll see how that goes. But it will be there. And if you have any suggestions for future topics that you'd like to hear us talk about, you can send those into Champions of Psychology at codenameentertainment.com or tweet at us. We'll listen. We'll see what we got going on. If you are live with us right now, be sure to stay right where you are for Bardic Inspiration. Following immediately after this. Well, not as soon as I click on at 1. It'll be on at 1 immediately after this. I think y'all are really gonna enjoy that episode. But that is gonna do it for this week. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.